What would you do if someone tried to humiliate your mom in public? And the rules were on your side. Zion faced a moment that would change everything. An ordinary lunch turned into a battle against unfair authority, bias, and outright discrimination. His courage in that tense moment didn't just protect his mom. It shocked everyone watching and exposed the truth about injustice. Watch until the end to see how one teen stood up against hate. And don't forget to like, share, and comment, because this story proves courage can inspire everyone around you. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary flight. Passengers were settling in, flight attendants moving up and down the aisles, when suddenly, chaos erupted in front of everyone. Zion's heart pounded in his chest as he saw Jennifer, the flight attendant, lean aggressively toward his mom, Tasha, and demand something he couldn't quite understand. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the usual hum of the cabin like a knife. People glanced up, some whispering, some frozen in shock. Zion felt a surge of panic. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew something wasn't right. His mom's face was tense, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She was trying to explain herself, but Jennifer wasn't listening. She kept insisting, her tone growing louder, more insistent, more threatening. The other passengers started shifting in their seats, murmuring. A few phones came out. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Zion felt every heartbeat like a drum in his chest. What could make someone act like this? Against his mom? In front of everyone? And then something inside him snapped. Zion took a deep breath, his hands trembling, and stood up. All eyes turned to him. The whole cabin seemed to hold its breath. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say, but he knew he had to do something. He knew the rules. He had read them countless times. And in that moment, he made a choice that would shock everyone on that plane, including Jennifer. What Zion said next wasn't just words. It was a statement that would turn the entire flight upside down. Words that would challenge authority, silence doubt, and leave everyone in stunned disbelief. But would it be enough? Would speaking the truth stop the chaos, or make things even worse? You won't believe how this confrontation ends. Zion's mornings always began the same way. The soft hum of his alarm, the smell of toast wafting from the kitchen, and the laughter of his mom, Tasha, as she got ready for her day. Their small apartment was modest, cluttered with hand-me-down furniture and photos of smiling family moments, but it felt like home, a safe, comforting bubble in a world that sometimes felt too large and too harsh. Zion, 17, walked to school with headphones in, music shielding him from the noise of the streets. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of kid who noticed the little things, the way the sunlight hit the sidewalk, the pattern of cracks in a wall, the nervous twitch in a classmate's eye before a big presentation. Teachers liked him, friends respected him. Life felt predictable, steady, like a river flowing smoothly toward tomorrow. Tasha worked long hours at a local diner. She was strong in ways Zion could only admire, patient, resilient, and fiercely protective. She had raised him mostly on her own, instilling in him pride in who he was, teaching him to carry himself with dignity, and reminding him that the world wouldn't always be fair, but he could still navigate it with honesty and strength. Outside their little bubble, life wasn't always kind. Zion had learned early that not everyone looked at him the same way. A few classmates whispered hurtful names in the hallway. Strangers sometimes crossed to the other side of the street, and teachers occasionally underestimated him. But those moments were rare, scattered like shadows in the sun. Mostly, Zion felt he could move through the world safely, protected by his mother's love and his own careful awareness. It was a Thursday when the first real hint of tension appeared. Tasha had an appointment downtown and Zion had the day off. They decided to grab a quick lunch at a popular cafe near the airport before she headed to work. The place was bustling, full of tourists, families, and business people. Zion felt the usual nervousness that came with crowded spaces, but Tasha's presence calmed him. He loved these small outings, the ordinary normalcy of them. As they waited in line, Zion noticed subtle glances, the way a man shifted uncomfortably when they walked past, the cashier's hesitant smile. Nothing overt, nothing to call out, just little sparks that hinted at the invisible walls that had always existed, just beneath the surface. He shook it off, told himself he was imagining things. But the unease lingered, a quiet prelude to the storm that was about to arrive. Zion didn't know it yet, but in a matter of hours, the rules of his world would be challenged. Ordinary life, the safe, predictable rhythms of home, school, and family, would collide with raw prejudice and unjust authority. And the courage he had been quietly nurturing would be tested in ways he never imagined. Little did he know, the lunch line would become the stage for a confrontation that would expose not just ignorance, but the harsh reality of societal bias. A single interaction, one small spark, would ignite a chain of events that would force Zion to stand tall, speak clearly, and confront injustice head-on. The moment Tasha and Zion stepped up to the cafe counter, the energy in the room shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Zion felt it before he could name it. The lingering glances, the tight smiles, the whispered mutterings that seemed just loud enough to reach his ears. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to imagination. But even as he ordered his iced tea, the discomfort grew heavier, like a storm cloud slowly drifting over the sun. They hadn't even received their drinks when Jennifer, the flight attendant, appeared at the other side of the cafe. Zion froze. He recognized her instantly from a brief encounter his mom had mentioned, a conversation about flights and schedules. Something in her eyes, sharp and calculating, made him instinctively take a step closer to Tasha. "Excuse me?" Jennifer's voice cut across the cafe, startling both Zion and the nearby customers. It was polite on the surface, but there was an unmistakable edge, a thinly veiled accusation. "Are you, your mother, aware of the policy regarding—" Zion's chest tightened. He didn't understand what she meant, but the tone suggested blame. He watched as Tasha's face shifted from calm patience to subtle anxiety, a flicker of unease crossing her features. She straightened, her hands gripping her purse tightly. I'm not sure what you're referring to," she said cautiously. Jennifer's eyes narrowed, scanning the cafe as if she expected an audience to judge. And maybe she did, because heads turned. Whispers grew louder, the tension spreading like wildfire. Zion felt a knot in his stomach, a mix of fear and indignation, but also a surge of protective instinct. "You need to step aside," Jennifer continued, her voice rising just enough to command attention. "I can't allow—" Zion couldn't let it go. "Not here, not now." He stepped forward, his own voice firm, trembling slightly but growing stronger with every word. "No, you don't get to treat my mom like this." "She's done nothing wrong." A silence fell. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Some patrons looked intrigued, others wary. Jennifer's lips tightened, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "Sir, young man, this isn't up for debate," she snapped. Zion's pulse pounded in his ears. He could feel the weight of everyone's eyes. But he refused to step back. He knew his rights. He had read the airline policy cover to cover. And now, in front of a growing crowd, he spoke not just for himself but for his mom. "Actually, according to your policy," Zion said, glancing at the small gathering of people around them, "you can't force her to leave. She's entitled to remain seated, and you don't have the authority to treat us like this in public." Gasps echoed through the cafe. Tasha's hand went to her mouth. Jennifer's face flushed, a mixture of anger and disbelief. You don't understand the situation," she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Zion felt a surge of defiance. But just as it seemed they might have a chance to stand their ground, Jennifer called for backup. Another staff member, a manager, someone to enforce her version of authority. The weight of systemic power pressed down on them. It wasn't just one person being unreasonable. It was the machinery of rules, hierarchies, and institutional bias ready to crush anyone who dared challenge it. The manager arrived. Clipboard in hand, expression polite but firm. He glanced at Zion, Tasha, then at Jennifer, clearly expecting them to comply. "I need you to follow protocol," he said. Zion's jaw tightened. He could feel his mom's fear and embarrassment, hear the whispers growing louder around them. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet determination was building. He had to act, to assert their dignity, to push against the unfairness. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to protect his mom. to not let them be humiliated here, especially in front of strangers who might silently judge them. And then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, Jennifer made a move, swift, calculated, threatening. She reached toward Tasha's arm, intending to enforce her authority physically. Zion's heart leapt into his throat. The cafe erupted in chaos. Patrons gasped, phones came out, murmurs became exclamations. Every second felt stretched, thick with anticipation. Zion's mind raced. Could he stop her? Could he prevent this humiliation without escalating the situation further? And what would happen if the rules, the policies, the systemic structures that seemed to favor Jennifer over them came crashing down on them anyway? The answers were about to unfold, but for now, the cafe was a battleground, a stage for courage, injustice, and the raw clash between authority and principle. Zion knew this moment would define not just their lunch outing, but the lessons of dignity, resilience, and courage that he would carry forever. Would he manage to protect his mom? Or would the machinery of bias and authority win this public confrontation? The storm was only beginning. The cafe had turned into a pressure cooker. Every whisper, every sideways glance, every phone camera slowly raised toward them made Zion's chest feel heavier. The air felt charged with judgment, fear, and expectation. Tasha clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white, while Zion's heart hammered like a war drum. He could see the panic in his mom's eyes. But more than that, he could feel the weight of every injustice she had ever faced pressing down on her, Jennifer. The flight attendant stood rigid, her posture sharp, her voice like glass as she repeated her demands. "You need to leave. Now." The manager hovered behind her, polite but firm, eyes flicking to Zion, silently daring him to defy authority. Around them, the cafe murmurs swelled into a chorus of judgment, some curious, some critical. The world seemed to shrink to the space between Zion, his mom, and the two figures who had decided they had the right to dictate what was happening. Zion felt a spark ignite inside him. Every insult, every sideways glance he had endured in his life, every time his skin, his presence, or his very existence had been judged or minimized, surged into the moment. He wasn't going to stand by anymore, not here, not with his mom in the line of fire. He stepped forward, his hands trembling, but his voice steady. "You don't get to treat us like this. We've done nothing wrong. We're not leaving just because you say so." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "You are being disrespectful," she snapped. "I'm asking you one more time." Zion's gaze locked on her, unflinching. The cafe felt like it had gone silent, every heartbeat amplified. "No," he said. "You're the one being disrespectful. You're using your position to humiliate us publicly. That's not authority, that's abuse." A few patrons whispered to each other. Some shook their heads. Phones clicked. Zion didn't care. The weight of everyone watching, judging and doubting him only steeled his resolve. Jennifer's face flushed, her hands moving toward Tasha as if to force her out. Zion moved instinctively, stepping between them, placing himself squarely in her path. His voice rose, calm but firm, carrying authority beyond his years. "Step back," he said. "Now." There was a beat of silence, and then Jennifer's hand froze mid-motion. The crowd held its collective breath. She could sense the shift, not just in Zion, but in the atmosphere. People were watching, witnessing, and suddenly the power she assumed she had began to crumble. Zion didn't pause. He pulled out his phone and, without hesitation, began to cite the airline policy she had tried to ignore. Each word cut through the tension like a blade. Every rule she had violated, every boundary she had overstepped, was laid bare for the entire cafe to hear. Patrons leaned closer. A few murmured, impressed. Some gasped. Jennifer's face darkened, but she didn't interrupt. Her composure was cracking. The manager glanced at her, then back at Zion, his expression unreadable but tense. It was clear. Zion had the moral high ground, and he knew it. Tasha exhaled, a sound of relief mingled with fear. "Zion!" she whispered, almost too soft to hear, but he didn't turn away. He couldn't. Jennifer made one last attempt, a sharp, cutting remark, designed to intimidate, to reassert control. But Zion's response was immediate, unwavering. He stood taller, voice firm, eyes blazing. "No more. This ends now. You cannot treat people like this." Not in front of strangers. Not in front of me. Not in front of my mom. The cafe erupted. Not in violence, but in tension, the collective awareness of injustice made visible. Patrons began speaking up, some challenging Jennifer, others calling for fairness, while a few pulled out their phones, recording the moment. Zion felt an almost dizzying mix of fear and triumph. Jennifer backed away slightly, the first real sign of hesitation. She looked around, perhaps realizing she wasn't just facing Zion, she was facing the entire room. And in that room, there was no ignoring the truth. Zion glanced at his mom. Tasha's face had shifted from fear to pride. She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening. He realized in that moment that this wasn't just about a lunch outing, or even one unfair encounter. It was about dignity. It was about standing firm when the world expected them to bend, to shrink, to accept humiliation quietly. And then it happened. A single word from Zion that cut through the chaos and froze the room. Enough. Jennifer stepped back completely, a mix of frustration and defeat crossing her features. She muttered something under her breath, but the words were lost in the hum of the now attentive cafe. The manager hesitated, unsure how to respond, clearly caught off guard by the courage and clarity of a young man standing up against systemic bias. The tension didn't evaporate instantly. Hearts were still racing, hands still trembled, but a quiet victory hung in the air, palpable and electrifying. Zion felt a rush of adrenaline, relief, and a strange sense of empowerment he hadn't expected. He looked around at the witnesses, the people who had watched, the ones who had doubted, the ones who had silently judged, and realized that, in that moment, he had rewritten the narrative. He had refused to be silenced, refused to accept injustice, and refused to let fear dictate his or his mom's life. Tasha reached for Zion, pulling him close. Her voice was barely audible over the murmurs of the cafe. "You were amazing," she said, tears spilling over. "I'm so proud of you." Zion swallowed hard, emotions crashing over him in waves. Relief, fear, pride, and exhaustion mixed together in a way that left him momentarily breathless. But even as the intensity of the moment began to ebb, one thought remained crystal clear. This confrontation was not just over. The battle against prejudice, judgment, and systemic unfairness was far from finished. And as the cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, with patrons murmuring in small clusters, phones still recording, and Jennifer retreating to gather herself, Zion realized something profound. Courage could spark change, even in the most ordinary of places, and even against the most entrenched forms of authority. But would this victory hold? Could standing up against systemic bias truly make a difference? Or would it only invite more challenges, more confrontation, more injustice? The answers were out there waiting, and Zion knew that whatever came next, he would face it head on, with the same determination, the same unwavering resolve, because now, nothing could make him back down. The cafe had slowly returned to its rhythm, the hum of conversations and clinking of dishes filling the air once more. Yet, for Zion and Tasha, nothing would ever feel normal again. The tension had subsided, but the weight of the confrontation lingered in the air, heavy and palpable. They had faced public humiliation, systemic bias, and the raw sting of prejudice, but in that very moment, they had also discovered the power of standing firm. Zion and Tasha sat down at their table, hands trembling, hearts still pounding, but a quiet sense of victory began to settle in. Around them, whispers and murmurs continued, but now they carried a different tone: curiosity, admiration, and even respect. A few patrons approached them discreetly, offering nods of encouragement or quietly thanking them for showing courage. It was a small but powerful reminder that not everyone in the world chose judgment over justice. In the days that followed, the incident spread far beyond the walls of the cafe. Videos recorded by patrons went viral on social media, capturing every tense second of the confrontation. Zion, initially reluctant, watched as strangers across the city, and even the country, shared his story. Comments flooded in, messages of support, disbelief, outrage, and solidarity. Many praised his bravery, his composure, and his refusal to back down in the face of blatant unfairness. But along with support came criticism. Some questioned why he had spoken up, suggesting he should have let it go, while others minimized the seriousness of Jennifer's behavior. Zion and Tasha faced a renewed wave of scrutiny, both online and offline. Friends, teachers, and family members offered advice, reassurance, and perspective, helping them navigate the complex emotions that came with being thrust into the spotlight. For Zion, the experience became a catalyst for growth. He realized that courage wasn't just about one moment of defiance. It was about consistently standing for what is right, even when the stakes are high, even when society pressures you to remain silent. The incident inspired him to learn more about systemic inequality, civil rights, and the ways in which individuals could push back against injustice. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Courage is contagious, and standing up for others can spark broader change. Tasha, too, felt the impact deeply. She reflected on the countless times in her life when she had faced subtle or overt prejudice, moments she had endured quietly, moments that had chipped away at her confidence, her trust, and her sense of safety. Seeing her son confront injustice head-on brought a mixture of pride and hope. She realized that the younger generation could challenge old systems, disrupt harmful patterns, and demand accountability in ways she had never imagined possible. Jennifer faced consequences as well. The airline launched an internal investigation, prompted by both the viral videos and complaints from witnesses. She was required to undergo additional training on professional conduct, conflict resolution, and diversity sensitivity. While some argued the punishment was minor, it sent a clear message. Authority does not grant license to abuse, and systemic rules must be applied fairly. The cafe itself became a small symbol of public accountability. Management released a statement acknowledging the incident, affirming their commitment to customer dignity and fairness. Patrons who had witnessed the confrontation spoke about it in interviews, on social media, and in their personal circles, spreading awareness of how bias and discrimination can manifest even in ordinary spaces. For Zion and Tasha, the lasting lesson was profound yet simple. Courage defeats hate. By refusing to accept humiliation, by speaking up even when intimidated, and by relying on knowledge, dignity, and composure, they had not only protected themselves in the moment, but had also inspired countless others. They saw firsthand how one person's bravery could challenge entrenched systems, disrupt unfair norms, and demand accountability. But the experience was not without emotional cost. Zion found himself replaying moments of fear and uncertainty, reflecting on how quickly ordinary life could turn into a trial by public scrutiny. Tasha wrestled with lingering anxiety, knowing how close they had come to being overwhelmed by authority and judgment. Yet over time, both found healing in the knowledge that they had done the right thing. They discovered strength in each other, in their community, and in the wider network of support that emerged after their story went viral. The long-term impact extended beyond their immediate circle. Zion began volunteering with youth advocacy programs, speaking to other teens about rights, respect, and the importance of standing up against discrimination. He found purpose in teaching others to navigate unjust systems with courage and dignity. Tasha became more involved in local initiatives promoting equality and accountability, sharing her experiences and advocating for safer, more inclusive public spaces. Ultimately, the confrontation in the cafe served as a microcosm of broader societal issues. The insidious ways prejudice manifests, the danger of unchecked authority, and the power of individuals to challenge injustice. Zion and Tasha's experience reminded those who watched their story that racism and bias are not abstract concepts. They are lived experiences that affect real people in real time. And just as importantly, it proved that resistance, courage, and unity can transform those experiences into lessons, empowerment, and hope. The moral takeaway could not have been clearer. Racism destroys families. Prejudice weakens communities, and silence enables injustice. But courage, dignity, and speaking truth to power can spark change, protect the vulnerable, and restore a sense of justice in a world that often forgets it. Zion's decision to confront discrimination wasn't just about one flight attendant, one cafe, or one incident. It was about reclaiming agency, asserting humanity, and and showing that standing up against hate is both necessary and transformative. As time passed, the memories of that tense lunch faded, but the lessons endured. Zion carried them into school, into relationships, into everyday life. Tasha carried them into her work, her interactions, and her advocacy. And together, they remained vigilant, aware that injustice can appear anywhere, but equally aware that courage, knowledge, and unity are powerful tools to confront it. In the end, the story of Zion and Tasha was not just a story of conflict, it was a story of triumph. A story of dignity reclaimed, lessons learned, and hearts strengthened. It showed that even in ordinary moments, extraordinary courage can emerge, challenging prejudice, inspiring change, and leaving an indelible mark on everyone who witnesses it. And as Zion reflected on that day, he understood something vital. The fight against hate is never truly over. But neither is the capacity for hope, for courage, and for justice. Every act of bravery, no matter how small, ripples outward, touching lives, challenging systems, and proving that unity and righteousness can and will prevail.